With Halo Infinite out and the tournament scene blossoming thanks to a massive influx of interest from old and new players alike, it's no surprise that having a good controller to compete with the best players is very necessary. When I first started playing Infinite, I was and still am a mouse and keyboard diehard, but I eventually conceded that for myself, right now, playing on a controller was the better option. It also helps that your boy is still cracked. But having played with a keyboard and mouse for so long, I realized that I didn't have any working pro level controllers. So I went digging in my closet to just see if I find anything.
Why are these controllers wrapped in bubble wrap? This doesn't seem like it's gonna work for me. This is a Super Nintendo controller. What?
And I ended up finding this like prototype cinch controller that had some wild left stick drift. I knew I needed to get a new controller, but I went online and saw the prices for Elite 2s, Scuff Instinct Pros, and even the Thrustmaster eSwap controller and was blown away by how expensive all of them are. A Scuff Instinct Pro costs just $100 less than a Nintendo Switch. A freaking Nintendo Switch. Well, this simply won't do. I knew that, like most turtleneck wearing app developers, there has to be a better way. Or at least a cheaper option so my wife doesn't rag on me for buying yet another controller. In comes the 8BitDo Pro 2 wired controller. Now, some of you may have seen this controller as a viable alternative to the Switch Pro controller and may not have known that there's an Xbox version that exists out there in the wild. I know I didn't. I went on Amazon looking to buy a Thrustmaster eSwap Pro controller and stumbled upon this little dude right here. Now you may be asking, what makes this controller so good? And I'm glad you asked, because there's actually a few pros and some cons, but overall, this could be the controller you're looking for. To start off, this controller does have buttons on the back of it that are bigger than cinch buttons and even scuff paddles. So you can remap those back buttons to whatever you need it to be thanks to the handy and I would say fairly easy to use software. That said, we'll talk more about the software in a moment because I do have some thoughts. The 8BitDo Pro 2 wired controller has a weird feel to it, but I kind of dig it. The design was actually based off of the Super Nintendo controller, which is not something that you would think works in the modern age of gaming, but here we are. Unlike the SNES controller, there are handles on each side to help with ergonomics. But if you want to live life on the wild side, there is a version of this controller without the handles. And if you had it, you'd be crazy. But also, if you like to see me suffer, maybe test this out on Halo or Apex. Let's see if we can get this video up to 100 likes. That's an easy goal, right? Right? Anywho, back to the controller. When talking controllers, there are two thumbstick layouts that are the most popular, and I'm pretty sure the only ones that exist. First, it's the PlayStation layout. Both thumbsticks are located on the lower part of the controller, symmetrical to one another. The second is the Xbox layout. Both thumbsticks are offset from one another, with the left stick being higher on the controller above the D-pad. Personally, I'm an Xbox layout kind of guy, so I was actually surprised when the 8BitDo Pro 2 controller weirdly felt comfortable in my hands. The buttons are nice and clicky, the triggers have some range to them, but you never feel like you're overextending your hand to pull them for that crispy perfect with the battle rifle. Even when strafing or crouch shooting, which is something that you do to try and avoid shots in Halo, I never felt like I lost control like I would on some of the older scuffs and even in the Elite on some cases. That said, the joysticks are a little slippery. There was one time in particular, I was in a one-on-one against my opponent and my aim just went wild. And I wasn't sure if it was because of the controller and the slipperiness of the stick, or if it was the game, because we all know that Halo Infinite got them some issues on PC at the moment. But despite that, actually playing with the controller felt really good. And I was shocked. I'm also shocked because this thing is coming in at the low price of $44.99. Which for the price of one Scuff Instinct Pro, you can get 4 of these. It's a pretty good deal. Hooking it up to the PC was easy enough. The controller has a non-detachable cable that's reminiscent of the old Xbox 360 controllers, aka the best controller ever made, damn it. But I would be lying to you if I didn't say that I'm not really that wild about it. Honestly, I would prefer if it just had a standard USB-C like slot so I could use a thinner detachable cable, because that cable is kind of a chonker. Once I had the controller set and ready to go, I jumped into a game of Halo and realized that the buttons in the back didn't work. Okay, so my buttons don't work.
Okay.
I gotta fix that.
One is nothing.
Buttons don't work. Oh my goodness.
I didn't freak out because thankfully I had this trusty manual here, which is just a series of papers and stuff like that. Anyway, I needed to figure out how to get this controller to work, and that thing was like one giant piece of paper with limited instructions and didn't really give me much. It appears that you can physically remap all the buttons on the controller without the software, but I have not figured out how to do that yet. So anyway, I just did a quick Google search to find the software and I downloaded it, and then I was off to the races. It took me a second to realize that the back buttons that needed to be mapped were actually located on top of the controller displayed on the screen. But as you can see, the software is very easy to use, but also painfully simple in design. So there's really not much else to do with it. Also, I'm not certain if the software needs to be open at all times. I'm pretty sure you don't need to because I've tested it out. But there were some moments where, you know, like buttons just stopped working or it forced me to remap them again. And then I would just reopen the software, do it again. It sometimes would have recognized that the controller was connected, but eventually I got this to work. But it also didn't help that when you're like trying to figure this out, you're being chastised by your friends every step of the way as you try to decipher this brand spanking new type of technology. And because I'm a boomer, you best believe that was very difficult. Now here comes the finicky part. There's a button on the controller located on the bottom right that needs to be pressed once you sync which buttons you want to assign to the back two buttons. And this little button needs to be on and emitting a light. That's how you know the back buttons are working. But here's the thing, you can sometimes press that button with your fat hands and end up not being able to jump or crouch. So you know, buyer beware. Also, there was a hardware update on the 8BitDo website that helps with optimizing dead zones that I would 100% download because it did make the controller feel a bit better, especially with the out-of-box experience feeling a little janky. I'm also happy to share that once you map the buttons in the software, it stays in the controller despite all of the weirdness with the software earlier. That actually does work. All you have to do, again, press that little button on the bottom right. Once it's illuminated, you're good to go. It should be the same exact buttons that you mapped on your PC. In Halo Infinite, I was running 5.5 horizontal and vertical sensitivity with look acceleration set to 3 or 4, whatever tickles your fancy. And my other dead zones were set to 003 for both the left and right joysticks, but you can tinker with it, see what works for you. My advice, though, don't overthink it because that's the path to insanity. And also, I've since updated my dead zones for the left and right sticks. So if people have questions for that, feel free to ask in the comment section down below. All right, so what's the verdict on this thing? Overall, the 8BitDo Pro 2 wired controller is a really solid purchase for just $45, which is crazy in this overly competitive market. If you're a Call of Duty player who just messed up their PS4 controller and you're making the switch to Halo, you might want to consider this one for sure. And hey, look, it's not perfect. And you might need to get a thumbstick grip so that this way you can avoid some of the slipperiness with this joystick and to combat that. But honestly, once you do that, you're kind of cooking with fire. I do have some issues though with potential wear and tear. I have been gaming hard with the 8BitDo Pro 2 over the last few days, and I noticed that there have been some odd moments where my gun would randomly fire, and it's apparent that the triggers are not the most refined. But honestly, for $45, you'd be hard pressed to find me complain because it's legitimately a great controller and a good introduction to pro level controllers if you've never used one before. So to bust out my X-Play rating, I would give this a 3 out of 5. And it's worth the pickup if you're in the market for an affordable option and you really don't feel like spending the coin for one of those more expensive controllers. So let me know what you think of the 8BitDo Pro 2 wireless in the comment section down below. I had a lot of fun making this video. A huge shout out to Spyro, the editor, for making this happen. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Drop a like if you can. Subscribe to the channel for more craziness like this. And also on the horizon, I do have some knockoff, like really low budget controllers that are on the way that I just wanted to test just for the fun of it in Halo Infinite. Really see if we get down to the meat and potatoes. So if you want to watch that, make sure you subscribe for more content just like this. Also, if you want to see another video of mine, you can check out this one right here. Pretty good video. I mean, I made it, so I think it's great. That's my opinion. Anyway, see you next time. Peace. Later.